Hello everyone and welcome to my Wild Rift tier list for patch 6.1 in season 17. Hopefully the start of the new season is going well for everyone watching, and in this video I'm going to be going through every single role and talking to you about what I feel like about the meta. There definitely were some big shifts in the meta in terms of mages with all the movement speed buffs that happened in the last patch, and also some of the new items. So this tier list will tell you who are the strongest champions at the moment in the role that you want to play, but also the weakest champions that you should be avoiding as well. If you want to skip to a certain point during the video, timestamps will be in the description, but let's head straight into this. For those of you who don't know, you can check out this website as well, Wild Rift Fire. This is actually my website that I do the builds for every single champion. I've actually recently updated it with all the new items and changes that have happened. So champions like Swain, for example, with the new item Malignance. You got the new item builds, which are very popular on supports like Seraphine and Sona right now. So definitely check out the website, and of course my tier lists are all up to date as well. But I always do this video to explain to you my opinions about why I put certain champions in certain tiers. First, let's talk about the Baron lane. Now, there's one champion that has stayed in the S+ tier in the Baron lane, and that is Wukong. Wukong, for me, is still the strongest Baron lane champion right now. One of the easiest Baron lane champions to play as well. The item combo of items like Divine Sunderer and Sundered Sky, and also his first ability with Grasping Undying, it just means that you can easily win every single lane. Isn't really a hard champion to play at all. You know, during the laning phase, you can stack up Grasping Undying on minions, and then you can proc the rune on enemy champions with using your first ability. Increased attack range is very, very nice as well. And then in team fights, you have your ultimate Cyclone, which is a very impactful ultimate, and you can still be a really big frontline tank for your team, as well as a bruiser, dealing enough damage as well. So Wukong still, in my opinion, stays in the S+ tier. But there are three other champions which I moved into S+ tier, which probably you could say definitely could move down because of just how strong Wukong is. But I wanted to give people a different alternative with different playstyles. Someone like Na, for example, is kind of very similar to Wukong, but has a very different playstyle. One of the reasons why Na is so strong right now is because he has the range advantage in mini form, and he does a lot of damage overall against some of these melee champions. And then in Mega Na, you have the big team fight ultimate. You can be a bit more tankier as well, and you also do a crazy amount of damage. You have champions like Rumble, which is an AP alternative in the Baron lane, and definitely probably the strongest AP champion right now in the Baron lane. You use runes like First Strike because you have your range advantage with your first ability and your third ability, and then you have your Equalizer, the ultimate, which is a very impactful ultimate which can definitely win an entire fight. Now, people get baited by building items like Malignance on Rumble. With this build with First Strike, you just want to go for full burst damage with items like Infinity Orb and Rift Maker, and trying to be more of a carry when it comes to the Baron lane. But if you want to play a tank, if you want to play a safer version of playing in the Baron lane, if you don't want to risk yourself playing some of these champions you might not be comfortable with, you could just play Ornn. Ornn is by far still the best tank with some crazy amount of damage, really great survivability, and also his ultimate is one of the best team fight ultimates in the game as well. So you have three different options there. You have AP option, you have a tank option, and then you have a few bruisers as well. Just underneath that in the S tier, we have some champions which are still very, very powerful. Singed got a really nice buff this patch with Ryze Crystal Scepter. Definitely the item in general has become a lot stronger, and you'll see that some champions definitely benefited from that the most in this tier list, which I'll talk about a little bit later on in the mid lane. But Singed is just a very annoying champion to deal with runes like Phase Rush, and also some of the spells like Ghost. You can just run around, be a big annoyance, and you have the slow with the Ryze Crystal Scepter as well with his first ability. So definitely a very annoying champion to play. Malphite, again, is still a very strong tank. Definitely a lot more beneficial against AD champions rather than AP champions, since his damage actually scales off of his armor. But still, in general, Malphite is a very strong tank. His point and click, you could say, ultimate is still also very powerful as well, just to easily knock up enemy champions unless you completely miss. Don't get baited by AP Malphite because Malignance is in the game. Again, the item is not that strong, then it makes AP Malphite viable. You still want to go for a more tank version. Just build armor and just be a tank for your team. Camille is still a great tank as well in the Baron lane, even though she keeps on getting nerfed. It feels like over and over again. Her lockdown potential with her ultimate is just very powerful compared to other champions. You have a lot of poke with your second ability, and you can keep trading in lane with your passive as well. She has great trading potential. Her damage is a little bit lower than maybe some other bruisers, but her ultimate is what really makes her powerful compared to the rest. Renekton's still an early game bully and an early game champion, where if you can snowball in the early game and get that advantage, then you can be a really big carry for your team. This is why you go for a rune like Empowerment compared to Conqueror. Conqueror has a lot better late game scaling, but Renekton really needs that early game advantage. If you fall behind with Renekton, you're very weak, but because of that, you win a lot of Baron lane matchups, with Empowerment and with your second ability in general. And if you can play around your Fury bar, then you can definitely do a lot of damage. Gwen as another AP option in the Baron lane is also a very good option. Fleet Footwork allows her to stack her first ability a lot quicker, gives you more survivability and more sustain during the laning phase as well, which can be Gwen's weakness. Gwen's early game is a little bit weaker compared to other Baron laners, but her late game scaling once she gets the 3 items and once you join team fights are great. There are some other options you can go for Gwen. You can go for like a more tankier version where you can go Grasping Undying. You can go for items like Rod of Ages. But with this build with Fleet Footwork, you go for items like Nash's Tooth and Riftmaker and Deathcap, and you become more of a carry than a tank. Aatrox for me is probably one of the most underrated Baron laners right now. The buffs that he got a few patches ago were really beneficial, and when you have items like Eclipse in the game still, Sundered Sky as well, which has a great synergy with his passive, Aatrox has definitely become a lot stronger. Also, his healing is just unlike any other champion in the game right now. When you use your ultimate, you get a crazy amount of movement speed, a crazy amount of healing, and even if enemy champions are building anti-heal, like Mortal Reminder, Morellonomicon, Aatrox is still going to be healing a crazy amount, and this could be a really big clutch factor when it comes to team fights. Jax, you can call an AP champion, but it's still an AD champion as well. Does a lot of damage with his abilities, especially with his rework, with his ultimate, and also his third ability. You can play him as an AP champion if you want to. I still feel like that mix of AD/AP with items like Trinity Force and Riftmaker is the best option. Really good late game scaling, really great split push potential, and can still be very impactful in team fights if you can land your counter strike. Poppy is still a very good tank. I moved her up from A tier up to S tier. The thing with Poppy is that her early game is very strong. Her damage potential is also very good. The range of her first ability is very nice as well. And even her passive has great synergy with Grasping Undying being able to proc it at range. I do feel like her damage definitely falls off when it comes to the mid and the late game. So again, the early game is very important. But your main role is not really to deal damage in the late game. It's more to do with being a frontline tank, using your second ability to stun enemy champions, and also making a big impact by stunning enemies up against the wall. You can go for items like Divine Sunderer, which can definitely help her damage output. But in the Baron lane, if you just build her full tank, you can still do a lot of damage in the early game, and you just scale to be a very strong tank. Warwick, again, a pretty underrated Baron laner with Aatrox, in my opinion. Warwick just really never loses lane. His first ability, healing, is just crazy strong in the early game. You can go for runes like Grasp to have a lot more sustained potential and a lot more traded potential in the early game, but you can go for runes like Empowerment as well, because you can auto attack and your first ability counts as a stack towards Empowerment, so you can use that to your advantage and proc Empowerment, so you can go for longer trades during the laning phase and you can be a bit more of a carry during team fights. But you can go for Grasp for more short trades and just a lot more damage in general. But the ultimate is very powerful because you don't actually have to hit your ultimate at the first time. You just travel with your ultimate, you auto attack, and then you lock down the champion for a long amount of time. Mordekaiser, again, as another AP option. I mean, the ultimate is just very powerful in general. If you can use your ultimate with the item Awakened Soul Stealer, and if you can guarantee that kill, you're going to pretty much refresh all of your cooldowns, as well as gain the stats that you of the champion that you kill in the Death Realm. So if you can use this on trying to isolate someone like an AD carry in the late game, or even someone like a support, I think it's pretty crazy to me that people don't really focus supports with Mordekaiser. If you have someone like a Yuumi or a Lulu or anyone like that on the enemy team, if you use the ultimate on that support and if you kill them, that's the healing and shielding off the board. So the AD carry in general becomes much weaker, and also it's a lot easier for Mordekaiser to kill as well. Nasus is pretty crazy right now. I think the only downside for me about Nasus is that you're kind of an AFK farming bot, but that AFK farming can soon become very, very scary in the mid and late game. I think once you get, I would say probably close to like 400, 500 stacks with Nasus, with the items that you go, again, the whole thing with Sundered Sky being able to build at the same time with Trinity Force and Divine Sundra, that combo that you have of the Sheen passive plus Sundered Sky being able to crit every single time that you auto attack, it's very, very powerful. And with Nasus as well, with a hit with his first ability being buffed, more damage, less mana, less cooldown as well, definitely a big factor with Nasus, and that's why for me he's sitting in S tier right now. And the one thing is as well is that people don't really know how to punish these weak early game champions, which is also why KO is still pretty decent in the Baron lane and also the mid lane, is because when you're playing in these lower elos, and to be fair, I say low elos, to be Master is probably low elo as well, to be fair, when you're playing like Master or even Grandmaster, junglers and top laners don't understand how to slow push a wave and try and look for tower dives, because champions like Nasus and KO can be very punishable in the early game because you're very weak and you're very squishy. But most players don't understand that. So Nasus can just sit under tower, farm the whole game, not get focused by any junglers at all, and then you're just free farming. And then again, as I mentioned, once you get 400 or 500 stacks, you're basically going to be unkillable in the late game. Volibear's buff in the most recent patch was definitely very beneficial. I think he's one of the strongest laners right now. The only downside is that when it comes to team fights, Volibear can sometimes be a sitting duck unless you have your ultimate. He struggles a little bit to get onto the back line because he doesn't really have any sort of dashes except his ultimate, but it doesn't really go too far, because the thing is with Volibear is he's all about running towards a champion, trying to land his stun, and then trying to get as many auto attacks down as possible. But sometimes that could be a bit of a struggle if you're against a lot of crowd control, if you're against a lot of champions that can lock you in place for a long time. It can be very difficult to get onto backline AD carries. But you are very tanky. You do win a lot of laning as well. You can push really easy and you can do a lot of damage. Now, Fiora for me, I originally had her in A, but I moved her up into S. I think she's like in between right now. If I still had like the A+ tier, I would put Fiora there, because very good Fiora players are probably, you know, the strongest, is probably the strongest champion in the game right now, in my opinion. But there's a difference between a very good Fiora and an average or a first-time Fiora player, because this champion is very highly skilled and can be very, very difficult to master. But in general, Fiora can do a lot of damage. I think that she's coming up with a rework soon as well, which is changing her ultimate, because there's a bug with her ultimate at the moment where if you use your ultimate and then you use your third ability as like an auto attack reset, it doesn't actually proc the vital for like the first 0.5 to 1 seconds. So you're kind of like nerfed at the start of your ultimate. Basically, you have to wait a little while before you can proc your first vital, but that's being changed soon as well, which is definitely going to make her a lot stronger. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Moving down into the A tier. A tier are champions that are still strong, but definitely weaker than the champions above, but they're still fairly decent champions. Teemo, in my opinion, definitely does benefit from Malignance. You can really skip like Nash's Tooth out if you want to as well, unless you really need the attack speed. But Malignance is definitely a big buff to Teemo, with the ultimate being able to slow as well. It makes it very difficult for enemies to escape from that Malignance pull. The thing is with Teemo is that he's still a very... he's still a very annoying champion to play, but he isn't very impactful when it comes to team fights. Teemo's all about setup potential with his shrooms around objectives. Again, with Malignance, that can be very powerful. And trying to blind the right target at the right time. Being invisible, trying to really be more of an assassin rather than a team fight. So it's all about hiding in bushes, trying to one-shot enemy champions before a team fight starts. Yone and Yasuo, the brothers, are still in A tier as well. Both these champions are still very good. The training potentials are very nice as well. Yasuo, of course, still goes for the tanky version of his build with items like Wit's End, Divine Sundra, Mortal Reminder. This more tankier build with Yasuo that allows him to be more of a bruiser than an assassin. Yone surprisingly can also go for the same build with like Wits and Divine Sundra, but I still feel like his crit version is definitely more beneficial because your third ability works as like a safety guard in a way, and you have a lot more trading power as well when you go for runes like Conqueror in the Baron lane. But both these champions are still very strong. Of course, their ultimates are some of the biggest ultimates in the game. KO I explained briefly, like Nasus. I think Nasus has a lot more survivability and a lot more late game potential when it comes to a carry. KO can still do a lot of damage as well, but if you miss time or ultimates, then you're basically a sitting duck and you could be one shot as well. The difference is Nasus can infinitely scale as much as he wants, as he's also very tanky and he's more of a bruiser. KO is more of a, if I kill you, if KO kills your opponent before they kill you, then it's great. But if KO doesn't, then she's kind of useless. But KO's still very strong. Again, you're kind of very weak during the early game, but you can scale to be very strong. Kenan's still a decent champion. You could do pretty well when it comes to laning phase if you'd go for like some short trades with electrocute and all of the abilities. But in general, the team fights are very powerful, but it can be countered very easily by exhaust. If the enemy AD carry takes exhaust, if you exhaust Kenan, then a lot of the damage and a lot of the burst damage is definitely going to be reduced by quite a lot. So that's why A tier in general, still strong, but not as strong as some other champions. Set as a tank is still decent. You do have a lot of crowd control with the ultimate. I think when you're playing against tank, Set becomes a lot stronger because you can use that frontline tank to enhance your ultimate, jump onto the back line, do a bunch of AoE damage as well. But in general, Set just doesn't, it kind of struggles a little bit because you're, again, kind of like Volibear, you're running towards the enemy backline. You're trying to get access to that backline, but you don't really have a lot to get to that backline. Again, you don't really have dashes. You don't really have, you know, an ultimate or anything that can really get to the backline. But in general, still a pretty strong tank and a pretty strong bruiser that can still do a lot of damage. Maokai as a tank is also pretty decent, has really good trading potential, especially with his passive being very strong with the healing over time, and also the saplings can be very annoying to deal with. When it comes to team fights, I think Maokai's ultimate is really underrated, probably one of the best team fight ultimates in the game with that huge massive AoE stun that you can land, and also his pick potential with his first ability, with his second ability as well. If you can pick someone off, if you can pick an enemy champion off and use that CC to your advantage, you can definitely do well for your team. Irelia moved up into the A tier. I think the buff definitely benefited Irelia more in the Baron lane than the mid lane. Of course, the health per level, the armor per level, the more damage now when you reach maximum stacks. So if you reach the maximum stacks on your passive, which is definitely a lot easier to do in the Baron lane compared to the mid lane, you could definitely trade and you could definitely do a lot more damage now with Irelia. The early game is still going to be powerful, even though they nerfed it a little bit a few patches ago, but a late game is now a little bit stronger as well. She's still an early game champion that wants to get an early game advantage, so using your passive to your advantage and trying to deal as much damage as possible is going to be very important. Again, Conqueror empowerment kind of depends on playstyle, but I think Conqueror is better just for the sustain and more damage over time. Shen is still a good tank as well. One of the best split pushers in the game, has the ultimate that can get from one side of the map to the other. The time of the ultimate, though, is very crucial because if you use your ultimate too early or too late, it means that your teammates might die, or you might lose a tower or a lot of minions in top lane, and the trade might not be beneficial enough. I think that's a big difference between a good Shen player and a great Shen player, is they know when to use the ultimate and when to stay in the side lane. Because if you have a wave crashing into you or minions crashing into you, you don't want the enemy top laner getting 3 tower platings for free. You ultimate on the other side of the map. Yes, you might have saved your teammate, but you only got 1 kill for it. So that trade that you got is you might be 1,000 gold behind, but your bot lane might be 200 gold ahead because they just got a kill. That trade you need to kind of think about when playing Shen, but in general, still pretty strong tank to play. Dr. Mundo, if you're against a lot of AP champions, Dr. Mundo is definitely the way to go. In general, is very good against AP champions because the amount of healing that he has in his kit with his passive and his ultimate. He still could do a lot of damage as well. He still could just be a very annoying champion to deal with. But in general, Dr. Mundo is pretty decent. Darius, another bruiser. In general, some bruisers has definitely moved down, like Darius, Riven as well have both moved down. I think there are some other bruisers which are stronger at the moment. Definitely, Darius definitely has that 1v9 potential with his ultimate, with his passive as well. In general, that 1v9 potential is very, very powerful. But again, some of these champions that have a bit less mobility and rely more on like boots upgrades to get mobility can be a little bit of a struggle. But with Darius, you do again have that 1v9 potential, which can still be very powerful, which is why these champions are in A tier and not in like B tier, because B tier is obviously weaker than A tier. But there's still potential to carry there. There's still potential to outplay in lane with Darius with the passive and the ultimate as well. Riven, a ton of mobility, but very difficult to play. I think Riven right now is actually a better jungler than a top laner because that mobility can be really beneficial when you're roaming through the jungle. Whereas top lane, her trading power is not as strong as what it is when you're trying to gank and trying to look for that burst damage. Your trading in lane is not that strong. It can be decent, but it's not as strong as, clearing through the jungle, for example. But again, one of the champions that, again, kind of like Fiora, very difficult to master, knowing when to use the ability at the right time. You've got knowing where to dash in the right direction, and also your passive as well, auto-attacking in between using your abilities to benefit from the most amount of damage that you can get. Definitely a big difference between, carrying with Riven and maybe not carrying with Riven. Olaf right now is kind of interesting in the Baron lane. I haven't really played him too much, and I haven't really seen him too much in the Baron lane, but he does look like he's pretty strong. I've been watching some competitive games over in China, and they've been playing a pretty decent amount of Olaf top, actually with Zeke's convergence as well, which is interesting because his ultimate can just be used and you can run around, you get that increased movement speed, and of course Zeke's has the slow as well, so it makes it actually easier for Olaf to stick onto enemy champions, keep on auto attacking, and you don't have to rely as much on your first ability landing. Just an easier champion to play overall. You don't have to really do too much during the early game. You just use your axe to farm minions, or you can use your axe to try and get a little bit of trading. You have your second ability that gives you huge sustain and a shield during the laning phase as well. So Olaf in general, pretty good. Again, when it comes to team fights, the ultimate can stop any crowd control as well. Zeke's allows you to stay in, enemy champions to stay in place, so you can stick to them, you can auto attack them, deal as much damage as possible. Tryndamere received a buff a few patches ago, which in my opinion allows him to stay in A tier. It's a weird champion, again, kind of similar to champions like KO and Nasus, where the early game of Tryndamere is very weak, but once you get past level 5 and once you get at least 3 items, you could be very annoying because you can just jump onto the enemy backline. One of the champions that actually has a more easier time to access the backline. The ultimate just makes you unkillable. You can synergize your ultimate with Last Stand as well to just give you even more damage. So you got your ultimate, you got Last Stand, you got your third ability, which means you can just jump onto the enemy backline pretty easily, and you can just keep auto attacking away. Just one of the most annoying and frustrating champions to play against, to be honest. But yeah, that is Tryndamere. B tier are definitely weaker champions compared to the rest. So these are champions that in general just don't have a lot of power, maybe struggle into certain matchups, and also just doesn't really have the same amount of carry potential as maybe some others as well. Pantheon, I think, has a lot better time in the jungle. Of course, it benefits him a lot more with his ultimate and with his carry potential. In top lane, he struggles with trading. He struggles with, again, just winning matchups in general, because he doesn't have the same amount of damage and he doesn't have the same amount of survivability as some other Baron lane champions. That's why you have to go runes like Electrocute instead of First Strike, because it's very easy to just stop Pantheon proccing First Strike in lane, which means it actually stops a lot of damage from Pantheon. Whereas jungle is a lot easier to proc First Strike because you're coming out bushes, you're coming for ganks, and you're using your ultimate. Whereas laning phase is a bit more difficult because you're there going hand to hand against an enemy champion. Vladimir, just in general, very weak. Doesn't really do a lot of damage. I think when it comes to mid and late game Varus, it can be very strong and it can be very powerful. But his early game is one of the weakest, I think, in the game. His early game is very weak. He definitely struggles in general, especially in the Baron lane. I think he might have a bit of an easier time in the mid lane because you're not going to get punished as much if you walk forward and if you farm some minions. But in the Baron lane, if you misstep, if you walk forward, then you can be punished by a lot of these champions in the Baron lane that have a lot of mobility as well. And also just, I think his passive needs to change a little bit because you're trading so much health for damage in terms of the second and the third ability that I don't think it's worth it. And of course your first ability is just not on a low enough cooldown that you can keep healing over time. Garen right now is pretty weak, but I think his rework is definitely going to help him. Right now he's just really a sitting duck. He doesn't have mobility. He doesn't really have a lot of damage. His survivability can be decent, but you're just a sitting turret at the end of the day without the range fucking auto attacks. You're just running towards enemy champions, hoping you could do enough damage that you can just use your ultimate. And hey presto, you can try and do enough damage, but right now it doesn't really do too much. Jace right now struggles in the Baron lane against some of these other bruisers. Again, one of these champions that if you do make the wrong step can be very squishy and you can definitely lose a lot of trades. I think there's a bit of a difference right now between playing like a more bruiser Jace or a more carry orientated Jace, where you're like one shot with first strike. I think Jace mid lane is probably better than Baron lane right now, but in general, the champion is pretty weak. You know, your poke damage doesn't really do that much. When you jump into melee form, you don't really do that much damage as well. And also, you're not really a tank or a bruiser, so in general, it's pretty weak. Urgot in general, I just don't really like this champion. I don't think he's very strong at all. I think when you're focused so much on such a low range ability, which the second ability can do a lot of damage, but when that's your main focus in terms of ability, and again, the game buffing so much movement speed to some of these mages, which means that champions like Urgot, like Garen, is just going to have such more of a difficult time now with getting to these mages on the back line, getting to these AD carries that have so much mobility and so much survivability as well. These champions that don't have a lot of mobility and focus a lot more on their auto attacks, that again is just going to be very, very difficult. Same with Sion as well. Okay, yes, you can try and split push, you can try and play Balth style, and you can try and just int and keep split pushing as well, but that style doesn't really work in Wild Rift at the moment, and it's pretty weak. I mean, when you lose an inhibitor, or when you take an inhibitor so early on in the game, because the inhibitors now respawn, you're basically giving free gold over to the enemy, because your super minions are always going to be pushing that lane. Great, you have a lot of pressure. But the minions in the early game are never going to do enough damage to actually take down the Nexus. So all you're actually doing by taking inhibitor in the early game is the super minions are pushing towards the enemy. So you're giving them free gold, but at the same time, you're losing gold because that lane is always going to be pushed in. So yeah, that's what I feel like about Sion at the moment. And Akali, I think, probably works a lot better in the mid lane right now. But again, when it comes to the laning phase, Akali just really struggles when trying to go for these short trays, trying to go for these outplays as well. That's why I kind of like her more in the mid lane, because you can play maybe a little bit more aggressive. You can try and catch the enemies off guard by maybe going for something like Electrocute. Bit more difficult in a Baron lane because the champions are tankier. They have like shielding abilities or a bit more mobility where they can out trade you and they can do a lot more damage. That's why you go Conqueror in the Baron lane instead of something like Electrocute. And Ambessa as well, I have to say, I'm very, very excited about Ambessa's rework when it comes to playing her in the Baron lane. She's a champion that at the start, when she first came out, I've always wanted to play her in the Baron lane, but she's just a better jungler right now. She clears through jungle so quickly. She has the mobility. She has the reset potential. But I'm really excited to see what changes they're going to come out with the rework. I know things like her second ability and her ultimate are going to become... she's going to become invulnerable now, so she's not going to be locked down by any sort of crowd control, and also she's going to have a lot more inbuilt lifesteal, which is definitely going to help her a lot more in the Baron lane. But right now, she is by far the weakest Baron lane champion to play, and you should just avoid her when it comes to Baron lane and stick to playing her in the jungle. And when it comes to jungle, now some of these champions are going to be repeats, so I'm not going to explain too much with the repeat champions unless they're in S+ tier, which, no surprise, Amumu stays in the S+ tier. People are probably still getting baited by AP Amumu right now, but honestly, you can just play tank Amumu. You still do the same amount of damage. You're a crazy tank. You have insane amount of crowd control. You can solo Baron. You probably have one of the fastest jungle clears in the entire game. This champion is a must pick or must ban in every single game right now. In a more competitive environment, you won't see Amumu as much because people know how to play against Amumu, or you can try and look for invades early on. But when you're playing solo queue, again, it's very much the early game is whoever farms the fastest, whoever gets the items faster, and whoever wins team fights wins the game, which Amumu does that compared to every other jungler. Wukong as well, I've also moved in the S+ tier. What a surprise. Wukong's in Baron lane and also in jungle in the S+ tier. Now, the playstyle with Wukong jungle is a little bit different. You can see it has first strike. You actually go for a lethality burst Wukong build in the jungle. You can still go for the bruiser alternative, which also why Wukong is very strong right now, because you have that versatility in terms of playstyle. But this one-shot Wukong build is so annoying to deal with because he can just turn invisible with his second ability, jump onto you, use your ultimate, and you're just dead. There's just no counterplay. Jumps onto you, uses first ability, uses ultimate, zero counterplay at all. First strike obviously gives you the extra damage, and yeah, the build as well is just absolutely disgusting. So that's why Wukong, in my opinion, sits in the S+ tier. S tier champions, again, not really too much has changed really in the jungle. Most of these S tier champions are going to be, you're going to probably see every single game, to be fair. Lilia with Echo are two of the best AP champions to play right now in the jungle. If your team has a lot of AD damage, Lilia is a great option, especially if you're against a lot of melee champions. The passive, the movement speed, the AoE damage as well as Ryze and Riftmaker just make Lilia one of the best champions to play against melee champions. Very annoying to deal with, very difficult to shut down as well. And again, if you need that AP alternative in the jungle in terms of damage, she's a great option. So Lilia, and then Echo as well, more of a burst damage mage, but again, if Lilia is banned or maybe picked, you can go for Echo again as another AP alternative. His jungle clear is still pretty decent with fleet footwork, but everything else, you know, more to do with the burst damage, jumping into the backline, trying to one shot, and then ulting away to safety. Rammus is probably the only other tank which is strong right now. If Amumu is banned and if you want to play another tank, I would say Amumu is the only other option. There are some other tanks that you can play, like maybe Nunu as well, but I think Nunu is definitely weaker than Rammus. Even if you're against AP champions, I think Rammus is still pretty decent. Of course, if you're against more AD champions, then Rammus is definitely more beneficial because his ability scale of armor, very similar to a champion like Malphite. So you have the crowd control, you have the mobility with your ultimate as well. Your clear speed is decent. You're a really good frontline tank as well that has a lot of peeling or engage potential. So Rammus's tank, very good when it comes to the jungle. And better, I already explained in the Baron lane, but it's a lot better as a jungler. The reset potential, the amount of low cooldowns she has on all of her abilities really benefits her, really separates her from the rest of the junglers as well. And even though she got nerfed in the jungle in terms of jungle clear speed and damage a few patches ago, she's still one of the best. She just works so well on mobile and she just feels so damn good. I love it. Warwick in the jungle, again, same with Baron lane, pretty underrated right now. I think this champion is very, very strong. I think the changes that they did with the ultimate definitely makes his pick potential a lot more powerful. Again, you don't have to focus so much on landing your first part of your ultimate. It's all about using your ultimate as more of a mobility to try and get closer to enemy champions, and then you can use your auto attack. And again, if you go for more AP damage, then this does more damage. So you can go for items like Awakened Soul Stealer to try and one shot, or Riftmaker to get more damage over time. Sustain is good. You have a bit of mobility as well with your first ability, but obviously your ultimate. And also you have crowd control with the third ability as well. So in general, this champion is very, very strong. Neela is a bit hit or miss. The reason why Neela is sitting at S tier right now is that honestly, I feel like when Neela gets 3 items, she is probably the strongest champion in the game right now. I think that she is completely unkillable at 3 items. Bloodthirster, Navori's, Mortal Minder, or even something like Collector. Your second ability can dodge skill shots, can dodge auto attacks, can basically make you invulnerable when you're jumping into fights. You have your huge AoE ultimate. Your auto attacks are going to do splash damage as well. She's just very, very powerful right now. Her early game, though, is so weak. Like, you take so long to clear through jungle in the early game that none of your laners are going to get any help with Neela. So when you have a Neela jungle on your team, or when you're playing Neela jungle, you have to understand that your main focus is not to gank. It's to farm. It's to get to 3 items as soon as possible. When you get to them 3 items, that's when you can start becoming a champion. Kind of similar to like KO and Nasus that I was talking about in the Baron lane. But again, once you get to 3 items, one of the strongest champions in the game, and definitely one of the biggest carries as well in the game. Riven I spoke about a little bit in the Baron lane, but Riven in general is a lot stronger as a jungler with all of her mobility and outplay potential. In Baron lane, she struggles a little bit, but I really like that her mobility helps her clear through jungle quicker, allows her to get from point A to B a lot quicker as well. Lee Sin, very highly skilled champion with Zed as well. I can put these both in the same category. Zed and Lee Sin are probably the 2 most difficult champions to play, I would say, when it comes to the jungle. You really need to look at knowing their limits when it comes to engaging, when it comes to dashing in and looking for team fights. If you understand the limits of these champions, and if you know how to carry with these champions, these could be the best 2 champions in the game to be able to carry, especially in lower elos as well, that people don't understand the way Lee Sin or Zed works. I mean, both these champions do a crazy amount of burst damage. Your builds as well, a lot more focused around lethality and damage items rather than becoming a bruiser. In general, these 2 champions are very, very strong right now. Very difficult to deal with, especially with Zed right now. Actually, a lot more people are actually going off building stasis right now. A lot of more champions are building things like Gargle Stoneplay. Supports are building items like QSS now instead to focus a lot more on the crowd control. And of course, stasis costs 1,000 gold. So if you're using 1,000 gold on stasis, then you're losing a lot more value in terms of your other items, which obviously Zed's biggest counter is stasis. So if there's not a lot of champions that are going to build stasis on the enemy team, then it makes the champion a lot stronger. And Aatrox as well. In the jungle, Aatrox can be pretty decent. You see a lot of these champions have fleet footwork. That's because fleet footwork actually allows and empowers some of these junglers to become these champions to become junglers. Because fleet footwork has the double auto attack passive, it actually helps the jungle clear a lot in the early stages, especially. Obviously, fleet footwork when it comes to team fights as well with Aatrox gives you movement speed and gives you a whole bunch of carry potential. Ganking, your ganking is not great with Aatrox, but if you have setup in the lane, like say your support is playing like Blitzcrank or Thresh, if they land the crowd control, then Aatrox can just run up towards them and just do a crazy amount of burst damage. But again, you building fleet definitely makes you a lot weaker when it comes to late game fights, but definitely empowers your early game jungle clear and gives you a lot more power when it comes to the early game. A tier, again, pretty average champion. So I would say in the A tier, it's more of the average rank of champions that are decent, but definitely have their hit or miss moments. Kindred is more of a carry jungler. The problem with Kindred is that if you don't have frontline on your team, you are definitely going to be very weak. Say, for example, I don't know, your team comp might be like Yuumi, Ezreal, Syndra, and I don't know who your top laner might be. Your top laner might be a Vayne, or it might be Gnar, for example. And if you don't have the frontline when you're playing Kindred, then you can't really play the game. And I think that's really the difference right now, is that not a lot of people in Wild Rift, especially in solo queue, play tanks or play just tanks in general. They prefer to play enchanters. They prefer to play more carry champions in the top lane, which if you're playing a carry jungler as well with someone like Kindred, you're more of an AD carry. So your focus is, peeling. Your focus is, focusing more on staying back, peeling. And if you not playing these more bruiser champions that could be more frontline, then it could be a bit of a downside to your team. But in general, I say that, Kindred is still a great champion, has a lot of burst damage and does have the carry potential if you pick it with the right team comp. Master Yi, definitely a lot stronger in lower elos. I mean, if I was thinking of maybe Challenger and above, I would put him in B tier, but I think in general, it's the easiest champion to play right now in the jungle. Doesn't really have a lot in terms of learning how to play the champion. The only real skill expression you have is timing your second ability, because the first second or two, I can't remember the time, it might be 0.5 seconds or something, but you actually stop 80% of the damage that's coming towards you. So if you time that perfectly, you can basically dodge tower shots, you can dodge incoming huge amounts of damage, and then that can allow you to carry team fights a lot quicker. But again, more focused champion that's focused on auto attacks, focused on resets. When it comes to high elos, people understand how to play against Master Yi, but definitely one of them low elo stomping champions. Viego definitely in the same category as Lee Sin and Zed. That is a champion that is very hard to master and a champion that's very difficult to play right now. Viego is definitely a 1v9 champion though. He's all about playing front to back. He's all about a champion that wants to kill the first champion in front of you. With Viego, you don't want to jump into the back line. You want to focus on the first champion in front of you and get your resets. As soon as you get your resets, that's when the champion becomes really overpowered. If you try and jump into the back line when everyone is alive and you're trying to be more of an assassin, that's not going to work. You need to focus the front line, focus the first champion, get the reset, and then with that reset, you can look to try and play from front to back. So you're cleaning the tanks first and then you're killing the back line afterwards. But again, can be pretty difficult to master. And also at the same time, you need to know how other champions work, as well as Viego, when you're stealing their soul. So that's also another thing to take into consideration. Yone is pretty decent in the jungle. I think the only downside with Yone right now is his jungle clear speed is very slow. But the problem is you don't really want to take fleet footwork because you lose so much of your damage in the late game. I think once you, again, get to 3 items with some of these champions, again, kind of similar to KO as well, as I spoke about in the Baron lane, some of these champions, once you hit 3 items, they just become very, very powerful and they just become very difficult to deal with. But it's how you get there is definitely the more difficult part. Again, Yone, you can play fleet in the jungle and it can definitely help your jungle clear speed, but it just gives you a lot less damage in team fights. So I actually prefer Conqueror with Yone, but definitely a champion that could move down into B tier if not played correctly. Here I just mentioned, jungle clear speed is pretty decent. Again, you're kind of similar to Neela, where your first, before your first 3 items, you basically don't become a champion, but Neela is definitely a much bigger carry than KO right now, which is why KO is an A tier, but KO can still definitely work. Pantheon I spoke about a little bit in the Baron lane, but Pantheon with First Strike, definitely a lot more beneficial when it comes to the jungle. His clear speed is pretty decent. His ganking potential is very nice with his ultimate and can be very good. Morgana right now got a pretty big buff with Ryze. I think people again getting baited by fucking new items like Bandle Fantasy and Malignance, where you can just go Ryze Leandri's Death Cap and you just do this, you just do more damage than the other items anyway. But people see new items and they think straight away it's like, oh, there's a new AP item, let's build it on Morgana, where the item just doesn't really benefit you at all. But Ryze's buff definitely benefited Morgana a lot. Definitely could be in the S tier as well as maybe another alternative in terms of an AP jungler. But again, you're more of a backline carry like Kindred, where if you don't have the front line, she could be pretty difficult to play. Talking about more assassins now. Gragas, again, another AP option that you can play. Definitely plays towards more the one-shot Gragas carry rather than playing a more, I guess, bruiser style that you could play in the Baron lane. But Gragas is all about one-shotting, about displacing enemy champions, and about separating enemy champions as well with his ultimate. If you can use that to your advantage, then great. If you can't, then it can be a little bit of a struggle. But his one-shot potential is great. His jungle clear speed is pretty good. But if you have a vision on Gragas, or if the enemy team has vision on you, then it can be very difficult and Gragas can be very predictable at times. If you know where the champion is, you know he's going to body slam forward, you know he's going to use his abilities or use his ultimate. So as long as you keep distance to Gragas, and after he uses all of his abilities, he's very weak. So he doesn't have a lot of cooldown. It doesn't have very low cooldown. So once he uses combo, he's pretty weak. So Gragas is like, if I can one-shot a champion, then great. If I can't, then I'm pretty weak. Basically, yeah. Talon definitely has a lot more mobility to his kit. I think the problem with Talon right now is really his damage output. He doesn't do as much burst damage as some of these other mages, but one of the great benefits of playing him in the jungle is his invisibility with his ultimate, and also the third ability as well, right? Just being able to jump over terrain is just so powerful in a game like Wild Rift that already has so many mechanics to be able to get from, you know, base to out of jungle very quickly, or from one side map to the other, because the map is very small. And that's the one benefit that Talon has over some other champions. But I definitely feel like his damage is a bit lower compared to some other champions. Rengar is a more one-shot carry with First Strike, is definitely still very good. If you know which empowered ability to use at the right time, you know, third ability for crowd control, second ability to cleanse any crowd control that come your way, or even your first ability to try and get as much burst damage as possible. Knowing which ability to use the right time is definitely going to be a big difference between good Rengars and great Rengar players. But in general, his ultimate is very powerful and his one-shot potential is very great. So Rengar's still pretty decent. Diana as well is also pretty decent in the Baron lane. I think in the jungle. Don't know why I said Baron lane. Again, First Strike definitely makes these junglers a lot stronger. There was a First Strike buff that happened 2 or 3 patches ago now, which basically reverted the nerf that happened before. It used to be 8%, but now it's 10%, something like that. So the damage is much higher, which is why these champions are still sitting in A tier, and these are champions that can still carry very, very well. Diana, of course, has her big, massive ultimate, and now that she can move with her ultimate as well, it just becomes very, very powerful. It means that you can move, you can use your other abilities, whilst your ultimate is scaling up and becoming this big, massive AoE ultimate. You can do a lot of burst damage as well, so Diana's great. Kha'Zix, stealthy champion, very slick, very smooth champion that you really want to look to try and isolate champions, try and 1v1 champions, try and catch the enemies off guard, try and sneak in bushes. If you could do that, then great. Kha'Zix is great. Again, Kha'Zix is more to do with cleanups in team fights. He doesn't want to be the first champion to engage. He wants to stay in bushes. He wants to play around enemy fog of war, and he wants to try and assassinate champions and try and isolate them to benefit more from your passive. But in general, Kha'Zix can be very, very strong right now, again, as an assassin. Fizz kind of needs fleet footwork instead of First Strike. The reason why is because Fizz's jungle clear is actually very slow. I think it's very difficult right now for Fizz to be able to clear through the jungle. So with Fizz, you need fleet footwork to help with the jungle clear in general. But you can go First Strike as an alternative if you want the burst damage. But Fizz in general has a lot in terms of ganking with the ultimate, but jungle clear speed can be pretty slow. Graves right now is pretty decent. I think the buff that happened a few patches ago definitely helped Graves a lot. He has a very cool interaction with fleet footwork where In general, Graves has kind of like a set attack speed most of the time, or has a very slow attack speed because you want to deal, you want to build more damage and more burst items because he has very good AD scalings with his first ability and his ultimate. But Fleet Footwork gives you that double auto attack potential and gives you more burst damage, and also helps your jungle clear speed as well. So I think Fleet Footwork definitely benefits Graves jungle more than a lot of other champions. Kayn in general, red Kayn, blue Kayn, both of them kind of do the same thing right now in terms of damage, in terms of carry potential. Manamune may be buffed blue Kayn a little bit more, but red Kayn can also be a great option if you're against a lot of tanks. Again, damage is pretty decent, but more of a champion who wants to carry and can't really do too much more. Xin Zhao, a bit of hit of a miss at the moment in terms of bruiser. I mean, we're getting more to the bruisers now in terms of junglers. Xin Zhao, I think the problem right now is that he doesn't really do a lot of damage and he can get kited very easily. You have your second ability and third ability, which can jump in, but after that, he doesn't really have much more. You have engage, but you have no way to follow up that engage as well, if that makes sense. You can dash in, you can use your ultimate, you can try and burst champions, which is what people did before. They went for a more lethality version of Xin Zhao, but that just doesn't work because his damage output is not the same compared to someone like Wukong, for example, but it can still work. Champion that can still dodge a lot of auto attacks with his ultimate and can still be a bit annoying when it comes to team fights. Trend mid jungle is still decent. The only downside is that you don't get they nerfed his passive, I believe, with jungle camps now, so his jungle clear speed is so much lower than what it was before, but it can still work. You can still be you can still kind of play like Kale in a way where you're just AFK farming through the jungle until you get 3 items, and then you're just annoying when it comes to team fights, but his jungle clear speed is very, very slow. Gnar is still decent in the jungle. Again, Fleet Footwork definitely benefits Gnar's jungle clear speed compared to others. The big differential with playing Gnar top lane compared to Gnar jungle is that you need to play around your Mega Gnar more in the jungle. Sometimes you might not want to clear an entire jungle camp because you're close to Mega Gnar and you want to look for a gank instead. Whereas if you turn into Mega Gnar in the jungle, and if you're clearing the jungle camps with Mega Gnar, your ganking is not going to be your ganking, sorry, is not going to be as good when you're playing Mini Gnar, which means you want to play around Mega Gnar more often. So you're clearing through jungle camps, but you might not want to clear through all of them because you want to keep Mega Gnar for when it comes to team fights or a big objective. Shyvana's still good. Again, one of the best scaling junglers to play. Again, kind of similar category to someone like Kayle or Tryndamere, where you're focusing a lot more on gaining passive stacks, upgrading your abilities as well. But once you upgrade your abilities, you can be very strong with your ultimate. Problem is mobility with Shyvana. Not being able to get to the backline is easy. You do have your ultimate, which can dash onto the backline, but after that, you're just running around and trying to run to a champion, basically, instead of getting onto the backline. Jarvan and Vi right now, I have moved them down into A tier. I've actually moved quite a few champions down into A tier because I think the S tier champions right now are just a lot stronger. Jarvan moving down is just in general, his damage is not there compared to other champions. He has his lockdown with his ultimate, but the problem right now is there are so many champions which have dashes and which has ways to escape his ultimate. When you're playing this more Conqueror Bruiser build, you're definitely going to be a lot more better as a tank, but your damage is not going to be there. And then the problem is if you flip the switch, and if you talk about first strike one-shot Jarvan, your one-shot potential is not there either. You don't actually do enough damage compared to someone like Wukong. So Bruiser Jarvan is actually better right now, but your damage is not there, and you're more of a utility jungler, which I like to call it, whereas you're more playing towards benefiting your team rather than carrying your own team, which is kind of similar to Vi as well. Again, Vi is not really a carry jungler as such. These more utility style junglers that look to try and set up your team for success. The problem with solo queue is that you can't really rely too much on your team for success. You have to pick more carry junglers, which is why there are so many carry junglers in S tiers, because that's the sort of play style that junglers want to play towards right now. Hecarim can still be pretty decent. I mean, if you build items like Manamune on Hecarim, it can be very good because the item got buffed, and Hecarim in general can just keep spamming abilities throughout the game. Can be a pretty decent champion. Again, I feel like the damage is not there right now, but the champion can be very strong if you scale and if you become very annoying in the late game. Olaf, if you're against a lot of crowd control, the champion can be very good. Again, I was talking before about the Baron lane with Zeke's Olaf, but the champion in general is very, very strong. And Nunu as well. Nunu as a tank can be decent. You have a lot of zoning potential with your ultimate, and you can do a lot of damage. You can be very difficult to kill. Also, his ganking's pretty good. But again, the kind of mindset as well of you need to play more carry junglers rather than these more utility junglers that are not really going to help you win the game, because you need to rely your team to do more damage rather than yourself. B tier, these are just weak champions right now in the jungle. I think none of them will really be a surprise. Evelyn just doesn't really do any damage right now in the jungle. One of the weakest junglers to play right now. Even if you are invisible and you have that advantage with that invisibility, your damage output is just not there, and you're just not going to be able to one-shot anyone really right now in the current meta. Gwen probably should run fleet in jungle. I should probably change that. But the problem with Gwen is that her jungle clear speed is very, very slow, like extremely slow, which means that, you know, it's going to take her a lot longer to get to these item spikes that you need to get to. Darius, just his ganking is not great. Darius doesn't really clear through the jungle that fast, and when you don't really clear through the jungle that fast, you either need to be a hyper carry that can get to 3 items and be a, you know, a 1v9 machine, which Darius isn't, or you just become more of a ganker. The problem is Darius doesn't really gank too well. You go for phase rush because you can try and help with the extra movement speed, and that can help you with ganking, but in general that doesn't really do too much. Fiddlesticks is still weak. Please do not build Malignance on this fucking champion. I swear, like, people are getting baited by building Malignance on Fiddlesticks. It's not good. Mana is a wasted stat. You don't do that much damage. It really doesn't benefit you that much either. If you just go full burst damage Fiddlesticks, you do so much more damage, and your cooldowns can just be reset with Awakened Soul Stealer. So don't get baited by Malignance. But in general, the champion is pretty weak. If you have vision around the map, the champion is just going to be completely useless. Volibear much weaker in a jungle because of his jungle clear speed compared to the Baron lane. I think he's kind of dead now, in my opinion, as a jungler. I think when it comes to Baron lane, he has a lot more trading potential. He can win 1v1s a lot more in the Baron lane, whereas his jungle potential is not really that good. Maokai's clear speed is just too slow as a tank. The only real way that you can play Maokai right now is as a tank, because his damage numbers and his AP numbers are way too low compared to, you know, League of Legends. And if you're playing a tank that has 0 clear speed and 0 tankiness, then yeah, it's pretty useless. Nautilus is actually kind of a fun champion to play when you're playing full AP. That one-shot potential and the amount of CC you have is great, but in general, not a very strong champion. This is taking a lot longer than what I thought, but I wanted to make this as... I wanted to make this video as in-depth as possible, but I feel like I'm going too in-depth in terms of every champion. But hopefully you're enjoying me going into like super in-depth into every single champion right now. But yeah, in general, I want to go in-depth and I want to explain every champion and the benefits and the weaknesses of all champions so people can understand. Mid lane, this is definitely where the biggest change has really happened. I wouldn't say the tier list as much has changed, but mages in general have become a lot stronger. And we need to talk about the new champion, Ryze. Ryze might be one of the strongest champions in the game right now. And here are the reasons why. His level 1 is probably one of the craziest and strongest level 1s that you can go for. You actually need to start your... I hope that I changed this. Did I change this? I didn't change this. This is... You know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to change this on the fly. Boom, boom, boom. You actually start with your 3rd ability in lane. You do not start with your first ability in lane. And the reason why you start your 3rd ability is that this ability has so much damage at level 1, and it does AoE damage as well. So you have that mid lane wave clear early on, and you can also poke down enemy champions because your 3rd ability can spread. It's absolutely disgusting. So you start your 3rd ability, your laning phase instantly becomes better. You're one of the best late game scaling champions in the game as well. You go for tier, for survivability with Serap's Embrace. Rod of Ages makes you tankier. You can even go Frozen Heart because the more mana you build, the more damage you deal. And his late game damage is just absolutely disgusting. Like, once the champion gets 3 items, you're unkillable because you have so much movement speed. You do a crazy amount of damage. You can engage with your ultimate. You can disengage with your ultimate. This champion is just absolutely disgusting right now. Like, yeah, absolutely crazy. Very, very strong champion to play, and you definitely need to pick him up unless he's banned every single game, which most of the time it happens. He's either banned or picked every single game right now. And the only champion, in my opinion, that goes hand in hand with Ryze is still Victor. I still think Victor is one of the best, if not the best mages to play right now in the mid lane. I think the upgrades that he gets on his abilities are just much stronger than the other champions right now. His late game scaling is insane. His AoE damage is crazy as well. His clear speed in the mid lane is very strong with the third ability, with the laser, as well as the movement speed he gets from the first ability as well as the shield. He just has everything a mage mid needs. He has burst damage, he has AoE damage in team fights, and he also has survivability. There are 3 things that a mage needs, and Victor has all of them in one. Zoe is still really strong. Her pick potential is very good. You know, the CP trouble bubble is one of the most annoying abilities to deal with. Your pick potential, your one push shot potential is very, very powerful. But in terms of being more of a mage, you're definitely a lot weaker. Your mid lane wave clear is definitely a little bit weaker as well. But when it comes to team fights, one of the most annoying champions to deal with. You know, picking up infinite summon spells, sleeping people 24/7, doing a crazy amount of burst damage. This champion is just very good. Morgana, probably one of the most, I was going to say a bad word there, but I'm not going to say it. Maybe one of the easiest champions to play right now in the mid lane. You sit in mid lane, you use your second ability, you use your pull, you clear the mid lane, and then you try and roam to get a pick with your first ability and your ultimate. That is basically all you do with Morgana. You sit in mid, use your second ability, la-di-da-di-da, walk around the map, use your first ability, use your ultimate. There you go. Happy days. Again, don't get baited by building Band of Fantasy or Ludens on this champion. You just go Liandry's, Ryze, Deathcap. Boots of mana is more than enough mana that you need with this champion. You just use your second ability. Just don't waste your second ability when it comes to team fights. Only use your second ability when you're guaranteed you're going to hit, or when you're using it more zone control. People just waste the second ability and just use it to do whatever the hell they want. So, and also she has the third ability which can block any crowd control, which is also very nice. Aura is actually a champion that benefits quite a lot from the new item Malignance. If you can use your ultimate before you use your charm, this is where it benefits you the most. I think that's kind of the playstyle difference right now that people need to understand. Even if you're looking to trap enemies in a bush, you want to use your ultimate before your charm, so then you have the pull underneath them, which they can reduce their magic resist, deal more damage, so then your first ability and your second ability can deal more damage as well. And I think that's a big difference right now, that kind of a playstyle that people need to change. A lot of people are used to champions just using charm in a bush, using your first ability in a bush and trying to one-shot them, whereas now Ahri is to do with a lot more mobility. You can use your ultimate more often as well because you have so much ability haste, and you can do a crazy amount of burst damage. So Ahri, very strong right now in the mid lane, a lot of pick potential, maybe doesn't have the same amount of wave clear. You can go for like, I don't know about this, but you can go for like Ludens into Malignance. That can probably work pretty well, but I feel like you have too much mana. Maybe you can just go for defensive boots instead. And maybe skip, I don't know, you skip like Lichbane instead, or you skip Crown instead, and that will help you with your wave clear because your Ludens will help you in mid, and you still have Malignance for the ability haste as well. That's another alternative you can do in the mid lane with Ahri. Orianna just spams abilities and just does a crazy amount of damage right now. She also works very well with items like Cosmic Drive, which gives her a lot of more movement speed to dodge abilities, but also to stay in range to use her abilities as well. Shockwave, one of the biggest ultimates in the game. You go for Seraph's Embrace, which gives you the survivability with the shield, and you spam abilities. You spam abilities, you get a bunch of damage, and you get a bunch of survivability. Heimerdinger, you actually play more of a burst damage Heimerdinger now rather than the alternative build. I actually changed the build recently. You go for a more burst damage build, Infinity Orb, Rabadons, and Awakened Soul Stealer, and you more play around being more of a, I guess, assassin Heimerdinger rather than more of a utility team fight with items like Liandry's and Ryze. That's still another build, another concept you can go with Heimerdinger, but I definitely prefer this version because his burst damage can be definitely very powerful. Let me get rid of this. I keep forgetting how to do that. But yeah, Heimerdinger in general, more of a burst damage mage, can be very powerful and can be very strong right now in the current meta. Swain is a champion that at first I didn't think would actually use Malignance, but the way the interaction works with Malignance and the kind of other builds and the play style that you play with Swain, it actually benefits him quite a bit. I think the big thing with Malignance is you need to time when Malignance is spawning, like the pool is spawning, and when to use things like your third ability, for example. Because the thing is with Swain is Malignance doesn't work with every tick of his ultimate. It works like every 2 to 3 seconds, I feel like. So if you can time that in your head, and if you can stun an enemy champion with your third ability in the Malignant's pool, you can use the second part of your ultimate, your first ability, and your second ability to do a crazy amount of burst damage. And of course, items runes like Phase Rush allows you to stay in range with your ultimate and just be a tank as well as a really strong AP champion as well. But you can see here, Rod of Ages gives you the survivability as well. You got Malignance, Rabadon's a Rift Maker as well, which are very, very powerful items right now. Syndra, another scaling champion that can upgrade her abilities. She's still a very strong champion to play in the mid lane. Her burst potential is very powerful. She has enough wave clear really without Ludens, so you can just go full burst damage, which is why Syndra works so well right now in the mid lane. Yeah, in general, just a very powerful champion. Aurelion Soul moved up to S tier. Ryze is one of Aurelion Soul's best items to run for, just because the interaction with the first ability, and you can guarantee that you're going to hit the first ability for such a long amount of time. That Ryze being built with the first ability and also the extra magic pen that it gives now means that Aurelion Soul can just do so much more damage now with Ryze's first item. Crazy buff to Aurelion Soul, and I think one of the best scaling mages to play right now in the meta. Annie has moved or stayed in S tier. I can't remember where she was before, but in general, Annie is an S tier champion right now because she is, and I will say this right now, she is the best user with the new item Malignance. And the reason why is that Tibbers has AoE potential with the ultimate. And the great thing about Tibbers is that you can use the ultimate, you can stun enemies in place, and your first ability and second ability does a crazy amount of damage when champions are stuck in that Malignance pool. And again, when you play this burst damage champion like Annie, when you're sitting in bushes and you're trying to one-shot enemy champions, an item that's given you more enhancements and more ability to try and one-shot, great factor. I mean, she's just that's gonna slot right in basically into our item build. So in general, very powerful. A tier, Twisted Fate. I think his mobility is pretty decent. I think his damage is also pretty decent as well. I think at times he can be a bit of a hit or miss champion right now. If you can roam with your ultimate, if you can get an advantage with your ultimate, then great. But I think the problem right now is that so many other mid laners have much better wave clear, which means that they could just push mid and you're just staying under tower the whole game. And the problem is in Wild Rift is that people actually underrate how much gold and how much XP you actually get from minions. A Twisted Fate might roam into side lane. Again, I kind of explained this a little bit with Shen before. A Twisted Fate can ultimate into a side lane, but there might be an Ahri in mid lane that all she needs to do is Q the wave and W the wave and auto attack a few times. Then with her ultimate, she can get to the other side of the map and maybe even defend the roam from Twisted Fate. And then not only that, but Ahri gets a big advantage in terms of tower platings, in terms of getting minions, and Twisted Fate is denied all the XP and minions in the mid lane. So again, it's about timing. It's about knowing when to roam, when to get an advantage for your team. Zyra again benefits a lot from the Ryze buff. Really cool interaction with her abilities as well. She's a very annoying champion, a very easy champion to play in the mid lane, kind of similar to Morgana, where you just spam your abilities, you sit back, and you let your abilities do the work. You let your abilities do the damage. When it comes to team fights, you can try and do a lot of damage. Fizz can still work in the mid lane. I think the only struggle again is these mages are very powerful right now, but I think Fizz has a lot of outplay potential with the abilities and also the ultimate. But again, kind of assassins in general are struggling in the mid lane, and melee champions are struggling in general in the mid lane because these mages are so much stronger. Mages got the movement speed buff, mages got the kind of durability buff that happened obviously in patch 6.0, which makes them a lot more difficult to kill. Kennen still works. I kind of explained a little bit in the Baron lane with Kennen, but Kennen works. But the problem is just gets countered by exhaust very easily with the ultimate. Vex reset potential is very nice with the ultimate. If you can get resets with the ultimate, then great. Wave clear is pretty decent as well. The problem is you don't really have a lot of range. You're not really a mage. You're more of an assassin, which, as I said, in general, assassins a bit weaker when it comes to mid lane. The range of her abilities are much shorter compared to others. Zed right now much better as a jungler than a mid laner. As a jungler, you kind of ignore the early game weakness that Zed has in terms of the early levels. But Zed mid lane can still work just because the champion in general is very strong right now. And once you reach level 5, you can roam and you can try and get advantages around the map. Akshan can still work in mid lane. I think the champion is still pretty decent. I just think his carry potential is much lower than others right now. But the big advantage that Akshan has is the revive mechanic if you can get the reset off with his passive, and also the invisibility, which can also be a big benefit. KO kind of similar to Baron lane. People don't really know how to punish KO as much, or champions like Nasus as well. So you can just AFK farm. And actually these champions in general are a lot easier to play in mid lane because the lane is much shorter compared to top lane. Whereas top lane, you have to actually walk a little bit more to actually get back to the tower. Whereas mid lane, the tower is basically going to be right next to you throughout the whole game. So these champions like KO and maybe even Nasus are much easier to play in the mid lane. But yeah, in general, KO can still scale to be a late game beast. Akali, in my opinion, easier to play in the mid lane right now compared to Baron lane. I just think there's too many Baron lane champions and too many bruisers that just stop Akali from trying to make trades and trying to win trades in the early game. With Akali, you can use your invisibility to your advantage, and you can use it to kind of I guess make the enemy champions worried. Like, you can scare the enemy champions away with your second ability, and if you can trade very well, and if you can get the quick burst trades off against some of these mages with electrocute, then you can win lane trades very, very easily. It can be very powerful. Ziggs, in my opinion, I think the problem with Ziggs right now, even though he did get a buff, I mean, Ziggs might be kind of underrated, but I think the problem right now is that yes, you use your like a military barrage in a way, or artillery barrage in a way, with so many of your bombs and your abilities, but that's all you really do. You're not really impactful when it comes to team fights. You think of other mages, they're really impactful when it comes to crowd control, when it comes to burst damage, whereas Ziggs is kind of stand at the back, throw your abilities, and pray for the best. That's, in my opinion, why Ziggs is an A compared to other champions. Brand, again, got pretty nice buff with Ryze if you do want to build the item. But I think the problem is that Brand is doesn't have any mobility and is pretty much a sitting duck. If you get caught out by any mages, there's no way of surviving. If you get caught out by assassins, there's no way of surviving. So yeah, his abilities are pretty good, but it's pretty hard to step forward, and it's pretty hard to take that risk of stepping forward to try and use your abilities. Lissandra, one of the champions, again, that benefits a lot from Malignance. But I'm pretty sure you have to build Malignant's second item. I don't know. Yeah, or even third item like I have on here. I think Awakened Soul Stealer is just way too good for this champion because your burst potential just gets increased so much, and you can reduce the cooldowns of your abilities. Death Cup, of course, is an OP item, so you kind of build Malignant's third item. But Malignance definitely helps her damage a lot, especially if you use the ultimate on yourself. That AoE damage slow that you get plus Malignance can be very, very powerful. But in general, the champion's just not as strong as other champions right now. Galio, if you want to play a burst champion in mid lane, is pretty decent. But outside of that, doesn't really offer too much. It's more of, again, a champion that needs the one shot before Galio gets one shot, but sometimes Galio doesn't have that one shot opportunity as a potential. Cassidy, I'm still testing right now, but I think actually the way might be to go is just skip Malignance. I have a build on my site right now, which is Rod of Ages, Archangels into Malignance. This basically gives you infinite fucking mana, but the problem is you're delaying Death Cap, and Death Cap is the strongest AP item in the game right now. That just gives you so much extra damage. So yes, you're going to have unlimited mana to get 3 stacks on your ultimate, but your damage is going to be so much weaker, and you're only really strong at 4 items. Whereas before, if you skip Malignance, if you go Death Cap third, yes, you have a little less mana, and you have to play around your mana a lot more, but you have so much more burst damage potential by going Death Cap third item. So I'm still testing Kassadin, but I think in general, Kassadin's still pretty decent. I think his laning phase is not as bad as what people think, but yeah, just in general, the champion is okay. Champion's not that bad. Corki mid lane has gone down. I think Corki just needs to set up potential supports. Corki as a champion is very broken right now, but needs support from his supports or his jungler to be useful. Whereas when it comes to 1v1s, Corki is not very strong during the early game. Echo mid, obviously not as strong as in jungle, but Echo mid can still work. If you have the survivability, it's great. You can still wave clear very, very quickly, which allows you to roam much quicker as well. In general, it's pretty decent. Lux is okay in mid. I think the nerf definitely hurt her quite a bit when it comes to clearing through the mid lane and trying to clear through to try and roam as well. Again, people are going to get baited by building Bandle Fantasy on mid lane Lux, but you actually want to build Ludenstill mid lane Lux to help with your mid lane wave clear, which allows you to roam a lot quicker and allows you to roam to get advantage for a team. Whereas support, you don't really need wave clear, so you can build Bandle Fantasy to get more burst damage. The nerf definitely helped. The nerf definitely hurt Lux, but I still think she's a champion that can definitely still carry, and she's still pretty strong in general. You still have Yone, Yasuo, the brothers in the mid lane as well. Again, they're just average champions. I already explained in the Baron lane. They're just average champions, which can work and does have outplay potential. But again, melee champions in mid lane can struggle a little bit as well. And Veigar has dropped down 1 tier. Just not as strong as a mage right now. It doesn't really benefit from the new items. The movement speed is nice and the one-shot potential is nice. But outside of that, doesn't really do too much. B tier. Irelia are definitely stronger in the mid lane because of the buff, but I think Irelia is actually going to be stronger in the Baron lane now compared to the mid lane. I think things like, as I mentioned before with Baron lane, Irelia, her passive being able to get more damage now at full stacks. It's a lot easier to stack passives in the Baron lane because you're going to be against a lot more melee champions that might actually respect you a lot more. Whereas in the mid lane, if you come up against mages, they're just going to poke you and respect you a lot more. They're not going to actually allow you to get into range to use your abilities. They're going to play around your minions. If you try and walk up for a minion, they're just going to use their abilities and poke you down, do a lot of damage. Pyke mid lane can still work, but it's just more of a unique pick now and doesn't really work too well. Vladimir I've already explained already, but early game is just way too weak. You never have any prior in the mid lane, but late game you can maybe be more of a carry. Gragas mid lane, you just have to hope and pray that you can one-shot an enemy champion before they can one-shot you, but your early game is pretty weak. Katarina, there's just way too much CC in the game right now. Katarina is just never going to work in the mid lane until, I don't know what happens, to be fair. I mean, Katarina just, as soon as she jumps in, she's just going to get CC'd. Of course, if you're against no CC, Katarina can be a very good champion, but, and you know, if you time your ability and if you time your ultimate, you know, she's great, but there's too many ways that she can get stopped on her ultimate. And Jace I explained in the Baron lane, but just in general, this champion doesn't do a lot of damage and isn't really a frontline bruiser as well. C tier are just the worst champions in mid lane right now. Again, these mid lane assassins are just so much weaker in the mid lane compared to jungle, because jungle allows you to not be weak during the early game and basically cancels out that weak early game that you have, because you can just clear through the jungle and get level 5 much easier. So Talon, Diana, you kind of want to avoid in mid lane. Lucian, again, kind of similar to Corki, you need set up potential in mid lane and the champion doesn't do a lot of damage. And again, Lucian is much weaker against mages. The reason why Lucian was strong before in the mid lane is because there was a lot of bruisers and melee champions that were being played in the mid lane. But because mages are so strong right now, Lucian struggles against some of these mages. But you can still be strong against some melee champions if you get the right opportunity. And again, more supportive mid laners like Karma and Seraphine, these champions can work in the mid lane if you're a support main, if you want to play some mid lane champions, but you're definitely going to be a lot weaker than some other mid laners. AD carry hopefully won't take too long as the other lanes in terms of going through, because there obviously is not as many champions. But S plus tier has not changed. Every S plus tier champion that was in the last patch is still in this patch, and that's just because the meta hasn't changed and the champions just in general have not been nerfed. Corki is the most broken champion, or one of the most broken champions, I should say, sorry, in the entire game right now. I think the real big thing about Corki, though, is that I feel like you need a tank support. You can probably play an enchanter support with Corki and it will still work, just because that champion is just, or this champion, sorry, is just that broken. But he has a lot better time if you play with a support or a jungler that has setup potential, that has crowd control. Because if he can land his abilities are definitely going to do a lot more damage. And also it allows him to walk up more often, because Corki still has very low attack range. Sometimes he can struggle to walk up against some of these bruisers or assassins that might one-shot him. But if he has a support that can peel for him, that can, you know, crowd control and things like that as well, Corki can do a lot more damage with a tank support. But again, the champ probably still works with enchanter support as well, just because how broken the champion is right now. Severa is just the easiest champion to play right now in Dragon Lane, sorry. Honestly, you just W the wave, you Q the wave, you just clear through the wave, and you just stay AFK for the whole game. Until you get to late game, you press one button, you just press your ultimate, everyone gets a shit ton of movement speed. You can just auto attack the first champion in front of you. Again, it's more this front to back play style, where you auto attack the first champion in front of you and you're trying to kill the first champion as quick as possible. Your second ability is going to bounce onto the back line. If all the champions are grouped together, great. Your second ability is just going to bounce to the back line and just do a shit ton of damage anyway. Like, there is no skill involved really with Severe. The only skill is knowing how to use your spell shield and knowing the timing of your spell shield. Outside of that, your laning phase is just clear the wave, stay AFK in lane. And team fights, you just attack the first champion, use your second ability, use your first ability, and just pray that the team can help you kill the champion, basically. Varus as well has 20 million different builds, and his champion is so insane in terms of burst damage right now. ultimate is very powerful. Again, as I mentioned, you have on-hit build, you have lethality build, you have this AP build where you build Essence Reaver into Riftmaker, and also Fleet Footwork works on him incredibly well as well, because that double auto attack with Fleet Footwork means that you can stack your passive much quicker, which is very, very nice. S tier though, these champions are still very strong. Misfortune, I think in the right compositions can be very powerful, and her laning phase is very good as well. You can use First Strike if you want to, if you have a much more easier matchup in the mid lane, but I think Conqueror is just a lot more reliable in terms of damage. Ezreal, if you can land your skill shots, then great. If you can't, then the champion is kind of useless. But this champion has honestly been buffed like 4 times over the past like few patches, and the champion just keeps on getting stronger and stronger, and keeps on doing a crazy amount of damage in the laning phase. And Xayah, of course, my main, still stays in the S tier as well. This champion just has so much self peel, so much burst damage potential, and is just a crazy carry in general as well. Yeah, S tier champions are just pretty easy to understand why they're very strong right now and why they deserve to be in the S tier, just because of damage potential, self peeling, and also burst damage, which is kind of nice. A tier, champions that are maybe not as strong but still has the potential to carry in certain matchups. Ashe is more of a utility champion that doesn't have as much burst damage as maybe some of the other AD carries, but her, her crowd control is great. Her ultimate has great pick potential as well, and it can be very, very powerful. Zeri is probably one of the hardest AD carries to play, just because her auto attacks work completely different to any other AD carry. You can't actually focus, you can't actually target the champion you want to. You just have to focus on the champion in front of you, basically, and you have to pray that you can maybe jump onto the backline with your third ability, or you maybe get a way that you can auto attack champions behind. But Zeri is a champion that you hit the first champion you hit, and again, you just pray and hope that you do enough burst damage and spread damage as well. The ultimate with the electricity with Zeri, kind of same playstyle as Severe as well, but Severe is just a lot easier to play than Zeri. That's why Zeri is down here and Severe is up there. Jinx with Enchanter supports are probably probably an S tier, but in general, Jinx is pretty weak as a champion right now in solo queue. You can just get picked off very easily, and sometimes it can be very difficult to try and get the reset potential. Caitlyn's damage is just much lower, and she's just less of a hyper carry now compared to the other AD carries. Her laning phase is still very good. The extra range advantage you get is also very good, but I think in general, Caitlyn's late game scaling and late game power is just pretty weak compared to other AD carries. Kai'Sa, I mean, once you can get a few items, this champion can be pretty good. I just think she just gets completely bullied in laning phase until she gets the first item. And because most of the time your first item is Terminus, yeah, you're pretty weak until you get the item. Because what happens is enemy AD carries are always going to buy Boots first item. So you compare Boots compared to BS Sword, and there's such a big difference in terms of power spikes. Like, Boots are so much more powerful than just buying a BS Sword. Kai'Sa has less movement speed. Like I said, you're basically going to have no prio in your lane. You're going to have no power until you get maybe 2 or 3 items. And then if you have someone by your side, you can be a really big carry, and you can actually do a lot in terms of team fights. Lucian, when paired with Nami, is completely great, but paired with any other champions is just not very strong right now. Could be pretty strong with sudden impact. I mean, pretty sure I have it as an alternative. Yeah, an alternative. I haven't tested Lucian with sudden impact yet, but maybe it can be very powerful. But Lucian in general just doesn't do as much burst damage as some other champions. Vayne against tanks is very powerful. There's actually a new Chinese build which is going for Storm Razor plus a Magnetic Blaster, which I need to test at the moment. Vayne right now against tanks is very strong, but tanks in general are not picked as much, which, as I mentioned before, in Baron Lane or jungle, whatever it was, people just playing more assassins, more enchanters, more bruisers in the top lane, which if you're not against any tanks, then Vayne's not really going to do that much in terms of damage. And Jhin as well. Jhin just feels very hit or miss at the moment. Sometimes the champion can do a lot of burst damage, and sometimes you can one-shot someone, and sometimes you can do very little damage. Jhin is actually the complete opposite to Vayne. Jhin is actually very good against squishy comps, and actually really struggles to burst through tanks and try and kill through tanks. So if you're playing against squishy champions and a squishy comp, then Jhin can be a very good champion to play. So I just need to take another drink. Twitch is just kind of weak right now. Twitch doesn't really have any carry potential and doesn't really have a lot of damage in general. Draven, if you can't get an early game advantage, which Draven really can't at the moment, just because of durability patch, plus Draven's damage right now is not very strong compared to other AD carries. And also it's very easy to just sit under your tower and wait for a gank. And then if Draven's dead after he gets like a few stacks, then he's kind of useless. You need to get ahead with Draven, and by ahead, I mean very far ahead to actually be useful in late game. And Tristana right now just doesn't do as much damage compared to the other hyper carries. Just in general, the champion is pretty weak right now. But by far the 3 weakest AD carries, Kalista, I'm praying that her rework actually makes her playable, because my god, she is completely unplayable right now. She's so weak. The thing is with Kalista is you're supposed to dominate lane. You don't fucking dominate lane right now. And in the late game, yes, you can jump around a lot and you can do a lot of damage, but yeah, this champion's just shit. Like, just terrible. Neela obviously don't play in the dual lane, play in jungle instead, because this champion just gets bullied out too much and you just fall too far behind in the early game. Whereas jungle, you could just AFK farm, get to 3 items and be a late game beast. And Samira as well. I think Samira is also very weak right now. Again, in general, tank supports are not being played as much, because so you can't really pick Samira as much. And also her damage potential is just terrible compared to the others. And also kind of similar to Katarina, her ultimate can just be stopped by so much crowd control in the game right now. And moving on to the last tier, the support tier list. Not really that many champions to go through in this one. Blitzcrank is just the peak right now of support gameplay. Again, I keep talking about this, but I'm going to keep on repeating it if these champions are going to allow me to say it. But Enchanter supports right now are being picked a lot more than tank supports. And Blitzcrank is one, if not the best champion to pick against Enchanter supports. These Enchanter supports have really struggled at trying to get away from Blitzcrank's hooks. And if you land a hook, your champion does a crazy amount of damage. Just by Blitzcrank itself, Blitzcrank can sometimes solo AD carries. That's how much damage this champion does right now. So if you hook a champion during laning phase, if you hook a champion during just before a team fight as well, you get a huge advantage for your team. And yeah, not only that, but also he's an incredible tank. He uses Yordle Trap, which is one of the strongest items in the game right now, because it just has a crazy amount of snowball potential. And yeah, I just think this champion is just above the rest. But even against the tank as well, you know, Blitzcrank can still be useful against tank junglers. You just need to make sure that you hook the right champion at the right time, and you don't just hook a champion that's, I don't know, like an Alistar that can just headbutt you all and pulverize you all and headbutt you back towards the team. But there are certain scenarios where you can hook tank supports and you can still burst them in time, because your silence means that they can't use any abilities. So you hook them, you silence them, they can't use any abilities. Then when your silence is finished, you knock them up. And then that's the chain crowd control that you have. And then it allows the rest of your team to follow up. And like I said, sometimes you can hook tanks and you can do enough burst damage as well to even one-shot them. So, you know, very, very strong. By far the best support right now to play. In terms of S tier, there are still some very, very strong supports. I kind of want to call out Seraphine and Sona right now. The reason why these two supports are so powerful right now, I wouldn't put them to S+ tier, because this is more of like a solo queue tier list. But I think this is more of like a duo queue / trio queue playstyle right now. Both these champions do very, very well with the stacking, healing, and shielding percentage, but also the new Ionian boots. The Ionian boots giving extra mana per second is very, very powerful. Before, these champions would build boots of mana to get the extra ability power, but also the mana regeneration in general is just very powerful for these champions. But now you don't need to buy the boots of mana. AP is not very useful on these champions because you're less of a carry and you're more focusing on your healing and shielding. Now you could just get ability haste completely free and still have the base mana regeneration. Again, one of the main reasons why Boots of Mana was being built on these Enchanter supports was because of the base mana regeneration. Now this is being moved over to Lucidity Boots. You're going to be seeing every Enchanter support now build Lucidity Boots, and their cooldowns are going to be so extremely low. And the great thing about Seraphine and Sona is that they have AoE healing and shielding, which you can use on top of things like Harmonic Echo, Locket of the Iron Solari, and this combo of these items plus runes, as well as obviously Glacial Augment being very, very powerful. But the combo of boots plus items plus runes just makes it very powerful. Revitalize as well is also going to buff your healing and shielding. So in general, that's why these two champions are sitting in S tier right now. I do not think they deserve to be in S+ tier. Again, thinking about it, this playstyle is more of like a duo Q or trio Q, where AoE damage is more, AoE shielding is more focused towards the entire team or maybe towards one person, whereas, hey, guess what? You can't really focus on your team too much in solo queues. So you might need to play someone like, you know, Lulu or Milio instead that can maybe have a little bit more outplay potential, or Pyke, or, you know, maybe some other tank supports instead. But in general, both these supports are very strong though at the moment. Ornn, again, I don't see the support enough, honestly, in this game. I don't see solo queue people playing Ornn support enough. This champion does way too much damage. I explained already in Baron Lane, does way too much damage. Crowd control is there. The tankiness is there as well. His passive is so fucking powerful as a support. You can just allow your AD carry to buy an item wherever they want to on the map. Like, people need to play Ornn support more. I will make sure that people play Ornn support more. So yeah, Ornn support, definitely very powerful. In order to support the tankiness that he has, the crowd control that he has, the point and click crowd control with his ultimate, and the easiness of being able to engage just makes this champion very, very powerful right now. Lulu's still very strong as well, giving health over to your teammates, healing, shielding, movement speed, and also your laning phase is pretty nice as well because you can shield yourself as Lulu, which is pretty underrated. You can trade against some of these other supports, pretty powerful. Janna, one of the best peeling supports still in the game. The tornadoes are very powerful. The ultimate as well. You can now use your abilities whilst in your ultimate, so you can shield. I think the only downside now is that you can't decide who your shield is on, which is why she's not in S+ tier. If you can decide who your shield is on, if they changed it back to how Janna was before and you decide who to put a shield on, this champion is incredibly broken. But I think because it's now an AoE shield, kind of similar to Sona and Seraphine, it's not as strong. Because you can't actually decide. The problem is you can't decide who you're healing and shielding, and also it only goes on to 2 champions, whereas Seraphine and Sona, it goes on every champion within distance. Maokai's still pretty underrated as well as Ornn, one of the best peeling supports, one of the best catch playing supports in the game right now, and probably might be Maokai's strongest role. Pretty good right now. Oh, we're near the end. My voice is going. Milio support, cleanse on the ultimate is very, very powerful. I think it's pretty underrated that you can stop any crowd control that the enemy might deal to you. Has great peeling with the first ability, but the most broken ability with Milio, which is so underrated, is the extra attack range. Milio makes weak AD carries in the laning phase actually strong, and actually allows them to farm as well. You think of these low range AD carries like Vayne, Lucian, for example. Milio giving them extra range makes them more powerful, and that's why this champion is so strong. Of course, you have the healing, you have the shielding, and you also have the first ability, which can help a little bit for peeling. By far still the best carry support is Pyke right now. Pyke is still very slippery, very annoying to deal with. It can be a very good carry when it comes to more of a carry support. Soraka, still with her healing and shielding, is also very powerful, as well as Nami. But the great thing about Nami is that she has the outplay potential when she lands her ultimate, when she lands her bubble. That really defines her compared to these other supports where they're more to do with healing and shielding. You think of Soraka, for example, she's only to do with healing and shielding. Lulu is only really her shielding and her ultimate. Yes, Seraphine and Sona have some impactful ultimates as well, but I think Nami has the most outplay potential out of any enchanter support, which is why she gets picked so much in solo queue. She can really win or lose a team fight really with her bubble and her ultimate, so it's really, really good. Yuumi, just in general in solo queue, is just not very strong. I mean, if you play this champion in duo queue or trio queue, and if you play Yuumi with an AD carry or a jungler that you can trust and you know that will carry, this champion is very, very strong. And I think that's why that's why most of the time this champion does get banned, is because if I'm playing duo queue with someone like a jungler, I'm an AD carry main, they're a jungle main. On the other team, they might be playing Yuumi with like Hecarim or Wukong or someone like that, and they just 1v9 the entire game. And that's why Yuumi gets banned in every single game, because they don't want to play against this OP combo of Yuumi plus a champion that has great carry potential, or a champion that can player that can 1v9. Whereas solo queue, you don't have that same experience. You can't really trust your teammates. That's why Yuumi sit in an A tier, but can still be very good if you know, if you're playing the high elo and if you're playing with someone that you know in solo queue, for example. Rakan is still a very nice support, still has great engage potential, has a lot of mobility, and can, you know, his engage with his ultimate and his second ability can definitely win a lot of fights. Karma and Zyra are more carry supports in the bot lane. I think Karma can actually work pretty well with Malignance. You can build Malignance, and again, you don't need to build Ludens. So you can go for Bandle Fantasy. Bandle Fantasy plus Malignance is very, very nice because you have pretty much unlimited mana on Karma as well. But again, in mid lane, you just kind of want to go for Ludens. But Malignance definitely enhances Karma's ultimate a lot and gives her a lot of extra damage. Zyra as well, explained in mid lane, but Ryze is very powerful at the moment and just enhances her damage by quite a lot. Other tank supports that can still be played: Leona, Galio, Alistar, Thresh, Braum, and Singed. All these supports have their strengths and have their weaknesses. Leona is a very all-in champion that you need to go all in. You need to land your crowd control. The problem with Leona is that when you go all in, you have nothing to escape. So you need to make sure you go all in. You have the follow-up from your team as well, which can be a little bit difficult, but that easy access of engage can definitely be a big beneficial part for you. Galio is really good against a lot of AP champions. The thing is, there's not too many AP champions that are being played right now, maybe 1 or 2 per team. But Galio support still has a lot of crowd control, and still the ultimate can be great as a peeling tool. But of course, against AP champions, he is a lot stronger. That's my throat nearly going because I've been talking for the past nearly 2 hours. Hour and a half. Alistar just doesn't do anything in laning phase. His headbutt pulverize combo just doesn't really do too much. You never really can punish champions in the laning phase as well, because what people will do, they will just stay out of distance of Alistar's headbutt pulverize combo, and then you won't be able to do anything during laning phase. You're just a sick duck during laning phase, and the only thing you can really do is just try and benefit in team fights, which you can do with Alistar. I mean, his headbutt pulverize is very powerful during team fights, but in laning phase, you're probably one of the weakest tank supports. Thresh, I think, is kind of underrated. I think his pick potential is very strong. I think he does a lot of damage during laning phase as well. I think it's just a bit more difficult to play compared to other tank supports. Braum's pretty nice when you're against a lot of melee champions. But again, he doesn't really fit into the factor of, I want to carry as a support. It's more of like a duo queue / trio queue pick, where if you're with an AD carry that needs peeling against a lot of melee champions, then Braum can be great for that because of his passive and because of his shield. But Enchanters just in general just does that job better, in my opinion. Singed with Ryze is very, very strong as a support. You're just very annoying when you go Ryze plus Zeke's. Like, this combo is so disgusting to deal with as Singed support. And of course, this flip can be really annoying as well. So that's why he's sitting there. Lux is still a good support. Again, the nerf definitely hurt her a little bit, but she's still definitely very strong as a support. And in B tier, it just supports that, in my opinion, are just better in other lanes or just terrible in terms of Senna. I'll quickly talk about Senna. Senna basically doesn't have a rune, doesn't have a build, doesn't have damage, doesn't tank. I don't know. They need to just change Senna or give Senna a rune or something that just helps her a lot more. She just doesn't have anything right now that just benefits her. She can't be a carry. She can't deal damage. She just can't do anything at all. So yeah, in my opinion, not very strong champion. Swain is a lot better in mid. Of course, when you're playing Swain as a support, you want to be more utility based. You want to be more as a tank, but you be less of a carry. You can build Swain as more of a carry, but then you're going to struggle a little bit more in terms of laning phase. I think when you build Swain as a support, you probably want to just go for Ryze plus Riftmaker. You can go for Malignance as well, but again, that makes you a lot more squishier and you become less of a tank. Whereas obviously mid lane, you focus on being more of a carry than a supportive champion. Obviously, playing this style is a much weaker Swain at the moment compared to this style. That's why it's in B. Brand just doesn't work as a support right now. He just isn't very good as a carry compared to other supports. Popular support basically only gets played really competitive, but in solo queue, it just doesn't really work. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Morgana is just AFK most of the time. Honestly, most of the time I play with Morganas, they black shield themselves rather than their teammates. And when you do that with Morgana, you're just pretty useless. And also in your laner phase, you're pretty useless as well. That is every single champion in depth have had to look at in this new patch. Hopefully you all enjoyed that. I mean, I've been sitting here for an hour and a half yapping about Wild Rift and yapping about the state of the game and how strong champions are right now. Hopefully you enjoyed this in-depth version of this tier list. I don't do this as often because it hurts my voice, but also not really much changes in between the small patches. But when these bigger patches come along, I like to have a more overview look and talk about every single champion in depth and, you know, how strong they are at the moment. But if you enjoyed this, make sure you leave a like. If you've reached it this far into this video, comment down below and just say, we did it. That's all I want to know, if you made it this far, because I appreciate anyone who watches all of these videos and watches in depth and watches me yap. I mean, I kind of turned this into a podcast, really. I mean, I'm even yapping now instead of ending a video. Anyway, until next time, take care. I'll be checking out, you'll be checking out my rune tier list and item tier list soon. I'll be doing both these tier lists in another video in the near future. So make sure you keep an eye out for that one, because I've updated both these tier lists very much recently. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. See you all next time. Take care. Have a good one. Peace.